Welcome to Life Stories, where one moment can change everything. Imagine spending your whole life protecting the one person you love most, only to watch them collapse in front of hundreds of strangers, and realize the real danger had been sitting beside you all along. What would you do if the very people you trusted most were the ones who betrayed you? Today's story will take you deep into the heart of one mother's fight, not just for her daughter's life, but for the truth, dignity, and justice that her family tried to erase. It's a story about broken loyalty, buried secrets, and the power of finally saying, enough. Stay with us, because sometimes the hardest battles are fought not against strangers, but against the ones who share your name. Now let's step into a night that changed everything. The moment Nora crumpled on stage, time snapped like a broken string inside me. 1 second, she was poised at the grand piano, her hands gliding over the keys with the kind of fragile beauty that makes strangers hold their breath. The next, she froze, swayed, and collapsed beside the shining black instrument, the spotlight catching the fall of her body in merciless detail. I was out of my seat before the first murmurs stirred the crowd, the bouquet of lilies slipping from my lap and scattering across the polished floor of Willow Creek Center. I barely registered the gasps, the scraping of chairs, the confusion rippling through the velvet-draped hall. All I could see was my daughter, my brilliant, stubborn 12-year-old Nora, lying motionless under the heat of the lights. My heels hammered the wooden steps as I ran, heart hammering harder still. For 15 years, I had built my entire life around keeping her safe. Every doctor's appointment, every late-night worry, every carefully timed dose of medication, it had all been for this, to make sure no harm ever touched her. And yet, here we were. Here she was. Nora! I dropped to my knees beside her, my voice splintering the silence. Her skin was clammy, her breathing fast and shallow. I knew this. I knew exactly what it was. She needed her medication. She must have missed a dose, but that couldn't be. I had watched her take it myself before we left. She blinked up at me, disoriented, her lips forming words I could barely hear. Mom, don't feel good. It's okay, baby, I'm here. My hands shook as I tore open her purse, fumbling for the small silver pill case. I flipped it open and froze. The pills were wrong. Instead of the small, familiar tablets prescribed by her doctor, there were tiny white candies, their sugary coating catching the stage lights mockingly. A cold, choking realization rose in my throat. Someone call 911. I screamed, my voice cracking into the stunned air. Now! Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a figure stepping onto the stage from the wings. Brooke, my sister. Arms crossed, a smirk curling the edge of her mouth like a scar. She looked so composed, so disgustingly casual, as if she were watching a badly rehearsed school play. Relax, Erin, Brooke drawled loud enough for the entire auditorium to hear. You're being dramatic. She's just nervous. I stared at her, disbelief and fury crashing into each other inside me. These aren't her pills, I said, voice trembling. Someone switched them. Brooke's eyebrows lifted in mocking surprise. Well, maybe a little humility would do her some good. She's been getting a bit full of herself lately, don't you think? The world seemed to tilt sideways. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could only clutch Nora's hand as my mother, Diane, appeared at Brooke's side, already shaking her head. Stop causing a scene, Diane hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. Nora's fine. She just wants attention. Like mother, like daughter. Nora whimpered softly, her small hand tightening around mine. That sound broke whatever restraint still lingered inside me. My daughter, I said through gritted teeth, needs a hospital. Now. Ignoring the murmured protests, I punched 911 into my phone. Diane lunged for it, but I sidestepped, shielding Nora with my body. As I spoke to the dispatcher, giving details in a voice that barely sounded like my own, Brooke's smug expression finally faltered. Paramedics arrived within minutes, though it felt like a lifetime. As they lifted Nora onto a stretcher, her fingers scrabbled weakly for mine. I bent low, pressing my forehead against hers. I'm not leaving you, I whispered. I swear. As the stretcher disappeared down the aisle, I turned back to face them. Brooke, in her pristine white dress, Diane in her tailored suit, and something deep inside me, something I had buried for decades, came roaring awake. They thought they knew me, the quiet sister, the obedient daughter, the one who smiled through every slight and betrayal, who stayed silent for the sake of family peace. They were wrong. I was a mother now, and they had made the fatal mistake of hurting the only thing that truly mattered to me. Brooke's wedding was in 4 weeks, paid for by the Carter Family Trust, controlled by a single signature, mine. And as I watched the ambulance doors swing shut, sealing my daughter away from the people who had failed her, I made a vow. They would learn what humility truly felt like. Would you fight your own family to protect the one person who means everything to you? Have you ever discovered a betrayal so deep it changed who you were forever? As I followed the flashing lights of the ambulance into the night, I knew one thing for certain. The war for Nora had just begun, and I was ready to burn every bridge if I had to. The hospital waiting room smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a brutal reminder that life didn't pause for heartbreak. I sat slumped in a cracked vinyl chair, my jacket draped around Nora's tiny frame where she slept fitfully across 2 seats. Her face was pale, even in sleep, her hands twitching now and then as if still trapped in the nightmare of the recital. The doctor's words circled in my mind like vultures. She was stable. She would recover. But only because we had acted fast. Had we waited even minutes longer, the damage could have been irreversible. I leaned my head back against the cold wall, squeezing my eyes shut. I should have felt relief, gratitude, something. But all I felt was rage, a rage so deep it was almost geological, formed in layer after layer of betrayal. Across the room, the elevator dinged, and Megan, my oldest friend, hurried out, a folder clutched in her hand and worry stamped across her face. She was still in her paralegal work clothes, her heels clicking a desperate rhythm against the linoleum. "I came as soon as I got your message," she said, sliding into the chair beside me. I nodded, throat too tight to speak. Megan opened the folder and tapped the documents inside. "You were right. I pulled the Carter Trust terms. You have full discretionary control. Every penny Brooke's spending for her wedding, every deposit, every check, every arrangement, it all funnels through the trust." I stared at the folder without really seeing it. "You can stop the wedding," Megan said, her voice low and careful. "Legally, you could freeze her access tonight." It should have been empowering, a victory. But a hollow ache had begun to grow inside me, gnawing at the walls I thought I had fortified. Was this justice or revenge? I had spent my entire life trying to keep peace in a family that only valued appearances. If I destroyed Brooke's wedding, it wouldn't just ruin her. It would expose everything. All the fractures, all the rot, all the carefully polished lies. Could I really do that? Should I? The questions twisted inside me as the door at the far end of the hall creaked open. I expected a nurse or maybe another visitor. Instead, it was Diane. My mother's heels clicked sharply against the floor, her Chanel jacket pristine, her face carved into that same marble expression she always wore when confronting an inconvenience she refused to acknowledge. She didn't even glance at Nora. Instead, she marched straight to me and hissed, "We need to talk. Now." Megan rose instinctively, shielding me. "This isn't the time or the place." Diane's mouth tightened. "It's exactly the time. I won't have you destroy this family over a silly misunderstanding." I stood slowly, heart pounding. Switching Nora's medication wasn't a misunderstanding. It was sabotage. Diane's laugh was brittle. "It was a prank. You're making it into something it isn't." "A prank?" My voice cracked. "She could have died, Mom. You're being hysterical. Again." The word landed like a slap. I remembered every time growing up I had been told I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. Every time Brooke had been defended while I was expected to forgive, to smile, to swallow it down. Not this time. "You're here to make sure I stay quiet," I said, the realization hitting with the force of a freight train. She didn't deny it. Of course she didn't. "And if I don't?" I pressed. Diane's eyes went cold. "Then you'll tear this family apart. You'll be the villain. And when Brooke is crying at her ruined wedding, when the whispers start in town, everyone will know it was you. The air between us crackled with something old and poisonous, something that had always been there, festering just beneath the surface. This was never about protecting the family. It was about controlling the narrative. Megan placed a steady hand on my arm. "You don't owe them silence," she murmured. I thought of Nora's face, pale and terrified under the hospital lights. I thought of Brooke's smirk, Diane's dismissive wave. I thought of every time I had been asked to choose between their approval and my own dignity. And suddenly, the decision wasn't hard at all. "I won't let you rewrite this," I said quietly. Diane's face twisted in something almost like panic. "Erin, listen to me. We are offering you a way back. Think about what you're doing." "I am," I said, "and I'm choosing Nora. I should have done it a long time ago." I turned away from her, from the weight of all those years, and gathered Megan and the folder in my arms like lifelines. Diane's voice chased after me, sharp and shrill. "If you do this, you're no longer part of this family." I paused just long enough to glance over my shoulder. I guess that makes two of us. Have you ever faced a moment where standing up for yourself meant losing the only home you ever knew? Would you risk everything you were taught to believe in just to protect the person you love most? As I watched Diane disappear back into the shadows of the hospital hallway, I knew this war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the fight to come. Stay with me for the next chapter as the battle lines are drawn and secrets begin to shatter. The courthouse smelled like old paper and older arguments. I sat at the long wooden table, the stack of trust documents heavy in front of me, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Megan sat to my right, a steady presence, while across the aisle, Diane and Brooke whispered furiously behind their attorney's shoulder. Nora wasn't here. I had promised her she didn't have to be part of this ugliness. She was with Megan's husband at the park, somewhere with sunshine and swings and laughter, the way a 12-year-old's life was supposed to sound, not the sharp scratch of pens on legal pads and the cold deliberation of betrayal. The judge entered with a rustle of robes, and the proceedings began. It wasn't dramatic, not like the movies. It was slow, deliberate, devastating in its inevitability. Megan laid out the evidence, the falsified medication, the video footage, the suspicious withdrawals from the trust, the hospital reports. Diane's attorney objected, argued, deflected, but the facts were relentless. I didn't look at Brooke while the footage played. I didn't look when her voice echoed through the speakers. Maybe a little humility would do her some good. I only looked at the judge. And when he ruled to permanently revoke Brooke's and Diane's access to the Carter family trust, sealing away the money they had used like a weapon for so long, I closed my eyes and exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. It was done. Outside the courthouse, the sun was blinding after the dim courtroom. Diane stormed past me without a word, her heels striking the pavement like hammer blows. Brooke hesitated. Her mascara was smudged, her lipstick faded, her hands trembling. "You really hate me that much?" she whispered. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel triumph, just sadness, the kind that sits in your bones and never quite leaves. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I just finally chose to love myself and Nora." Brooke blinked at me, stunned. Then, without another word, she turned and ran after our mother. I watched them go, two retreating figures bound together by a lifetime of bitterness. Part of me ached to call after them, to fix what could never be fixed. But the larger part, the part that had been awakened the night Nora collapsed, knew better. Some bonds weren't meant to be mended. Later that night, Nora and I sat on the back porch, a blanket draped over our shoulders, a mug of hot chocolate cooling between us. The stars pricked holes in the dark sky, and the crickets sang in the grass. She leaned her head against my arm. "Did we win?" I smiled down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "We didn't win, honey. We survived. We made a new beginning." Nora was quiet for a long time. Then she said, almost too soft to hear, "Does it make me a bad person if I don't miss them?" My throat tightened. I remembered being her age, desperate for my mother's approval, willing to bend and fold myself into anything they needed me to be. No, I whispered, it makes you brave. She tilted her face up to mine. You're brave too, Mom. I kissed the top of her head, closing my eyes against the sudden rush of tears. I'm brave because of you. We sat there until the stars blurred, until the cool night wrapped itself around us like a blessing. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we were going to be okay. A few weeks later, I found a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, in my mother's tight, elegant handwriting, were 2 lines. Family is forever. You will regret this. I tore it in half without reading further. Family isn't something you're given. It's something you build. And Nora and I were building something stronger, more beautiful, out of the ruins. Some mornings still hurt. Some nights, when the wind rattles the windows just right, I feel the old ghosts pressing close, whispering guilt and doubt. But then Nora will laugh, or reach for my hand, or sit at the piano and play something so achingly beautiful that it feels like forgiveness. Not for them, for me, for us. Not every story ends with perfect closure. Some just end with survival. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. What part of the story touched your heart the most? If you love this story, comment 100 below to show your support. Tell us which country you're watching from. We'd love to know. And if this story moved you, share it with your friends to inspire them too. Thank you for being part of Life Stories.